In this video I'm going to run through my 5 favourite books by David Gemmell. Gemmell was the author that got me into fantasy, and he remains undisputed as my favourite in the genre. I started reading Gemmell in my early teens, and while I do think older audiences can get something from his work, I think that teenage readers are probably the intended audience. Probably Gemmell's most recurring theme is the hero, sometimes of fading powers, sometimes not, who knows the circumstances of his own death ahead of time, but ultimately has to decide whether to face it head on or not. By far his greatest strength, in my opinion, is his multi-threaded plotting. At his best, Gemmell will recount a B, C and a D story alongside the main plot, obviously, and interweave and then bring all of them together for the finale. Many of his stories deal with the stones of power, I think Sipstrassi, probably pronouncing that wrong, that contain an energy that's used for magical rituals. These stones are found in novels that are not connected in any other way, so you do not need to be a Gemmell completist to follow and enjoy them. So where should you start? Well, these are my 5 favourites, all wonderful books. There are others as well that are excellent, but I set myself to pick 5, so 5 it is. So we're going to start at the very beginning with David Gemmell's first book, which is Legend, which introduces Druss the Legend, probably Gemmell's most famous character, with a mighty horde of Nadir warriors threatening a disunited and fractious kingdom. Only one thing can save them. A small band of warriors must hold a mountain fortress against incredible odds. And Druss, an aged, fading warrior, he heads to the fortress to cement his legend and embrace his fate. It's action-packed, and it's a good intro to Gemmell, as well as the Drenai series that is probably his most numerous. Druss would return for prequels, but this is his finest hour. This one alone, given my sequelitis, gives you some indication of why I really like David Gemmell that much. It's Dark Prince, and it's an actual sequel. Yes, it's a sequel. It's the sequel to Lion of Macedon specifically, which is in itself a really great book. And the series follows Parmenion, the strategos of Alexander the Great. And in this one, he travels to a dimension overrun with mythical creatures. Lion of Macedon was a drier but still excellent take, pursuing a degree of realism that makes the more fantastical edge of this all the more striking. Parmenion knows his fate, but will give his life to rescue the true spirit of Alexander, who is being possessed by a demon. Incredible story, powerful themes, and just so striking for its combination of the fantastic, mythology, and historical verisimilitude. It's a great book, as is Lion of Macedon, but this one edges it. So, number 3 on my list is The Last Sword of Power, another sequel. Let that one sink in for a bit. It's a retelling of the Arthurian legend, set after the Roman withdrawal from Britain, where the Dark Age is being ushered in by an evil god, and Uther and the Lance Lord must oppose them. I've seen reviews where people didn't like that Uther is effectively Arthur in Gemmell's twisting of the original legend, but I have to say I really loved it. The changes Gemmell has made all work for me, and give a freshness to the story, while the foreshadowing, obviously, of the known beats gives that sense of Gemmell's tragic melancholy tone. So while this and the first one, which is Ghost King, share similar themes of history and mythology and fantasy, just like Dark Prince, it is the characters and the story in The Last Sword of Power that elevate them above the other two for me. The number 2 is Dark Men. For me, this is quite a special one because it's the first David Gemmell book I ever read. In the distant past, a powerful race offered sanctuary to a dangerous warrior tribe. Naturally, this didn't go so well, and the two races were then trapped inside magic pearls. Later on, a power-hungry human king unleashes the warrior tribe, who, without the powerful race that trapped them to hold them in check, run wild across the world. The Daroth are a truly terrible foe. They're virtually indestructible. They feast on human flesh. And Gemmell does a pretty good job of actually showing their motivations and their callous disregard for others. In a way, it's almost understandable. The humans that face off against them are some of Gemmell's best as well. Trantio, the troubled swordsman with a split personality, and Caris, the female general and mercenary, are incredible. The finale is powerful as well. I loved this book in my early teens, and I still do. It really is the archetype of Gemmell's plotting. It's beautifully crafted and executed. It's a real high point for me, but I do accept that some describe it as a little bit like a David Gemmell greatest hits. Before I do my number one, I'm just going to talk about a book that sort of just bubbled under. It's not on my list, but I know that people would have expected it to have been here. It's Wolf in Shadow. This is the first appearance of John Shano, another one of Gemmell's more famous creations. But this is also Gemmell at his most out there. It's post-apocalyptic, with Shano tracking the remains of the world looking for Jerusalem. He's armed with pistols, which is a departure for Gemmell, and I think something he has a real passion for. It's a great book, and I highly recommend it, but I had to pick 5 for the list, and my number one is... Somebody do a drum roll. I suppose I should, really. So my favourite novel by David Gemmell is Knights of the Dark Renown. Though this book kind of has a sequel, it might say something about me that my 2 favourite Gemmell novels are actually standalone when he's more famous for his various series, with the Draenei probably number 1 among them. Knights of the Dark Renown is probably the greatest depiction of the narrative of knights as a really honourable group, battling evil. Yet Gemmell subverts that when they're corrupted by a magic power from another dimension. All hope rests on the armourer, who blames himself for the failure, and Renown, the one knight who is too afraid to cross dimensions. Together they raise another group of knights to face off against the old, and each of them has a personality and a plot of his own. Most striking are the bards and the one recruit who's left over from the old group, Ariane. This book needs another 200 pages or so. You can see it's quite thin, so it does feel like the ending is perhaps a little rushed, but the melancholy, bitter tone of the whole text, the variety of the characters and themes of classic good versus evil and redemption. For me, this book is just wonderful, and I highly recommend it. So thank you for watching me talk about my favourite David Gemmell books. Pretty much everything he wrote comes with recommendation to an extent from me anyway, but these are my favourites. If yours differ, please let me know in the comments. Thank you for watching. There's options provided for free, would you believe, by YouTube for subscribing. There's a little bell to ring, there's likes, and if you really must, I suppose you could also click a dislike. But I prefer you just left me a comment. I'll see you in the next video. Goodbye.